Hey everybody, today Rahdo runs through his top 10 tile laying games, which was a tricky list to put together only because there are so many games on this wall behind me that feature tile laying. It's one of my absolute favorite mechanisms. It finds its way into a lot of games, and ultimately what I decided to do in making this list is to limit myself, to be very, very strict. First of all, I completely eliminated card games where the cards function as tiles. So, I mean, there were several that would have potentially made the list, but I figured, no, let's just be strict. Tiles. Tiles only. Cards are not tiles. Even if they function exactly like tiles, we'll just, for the purposes of this list, we'll cut those out. And then the other thing was, well, like I said, tile laying shows up in lots of games. And what I really wanted to do was have a list of games where it really is all about the tile laying. I mean, when you think about the game, you think about the tough choices you're making laying tiles more than anything else. And while I don't know if I stayed true to that 100% because, well, there's at least one game here, arguably two, where there are decisions outside of the tile laying, mostly related to grabbing specific tiles, that might mean the game could be qualified as something else, but to heck with it. I mean, like I said, it was hard. I mean, there were so many games I could have put on this list. You know, several in my top 20 of all time, but I'm pretty confident in saying that the 10 I'm about to talk about are, first and foremost, in their heart of hearts, great tile laying games that also have some other cool stuff going on too. So, without further ado, let's get going with number 10, Carcassonne the Castle, which, as I've talked about before, is by far the best Carcassonne out there. It so eclipses all the other versions of it, although to be fair, I have not played Star Wars Carcassonne, but I don't know. Time will tell on that, but man, we just keep coming back to this one as the absolute best. Taking the core Carcassonne tile laying formula, and Carcassonne really kind of popularized. I mean, we owe such an explosion of tile laying games that available today to Carcassonne, and while it may be a game that's just a little bit too light in gateways for me and Jen, I certainly respect it, but what this game does, layering in additional stuff, creating walls that constrain you, but more importantly, creating a point scoring system where, unlike regular Carcassonne, where you're always trying to build the biggest, best thing you can, in here, the game can become much more tactical as you're trying for short-term, quick scoring opportunities in addition to big, long-term ones to get bonuses that'll really change the game. It's absolutely phenomenal. I absolutely love it. It's so heartbreaking that Reiner Knizia, the designer of this Carcassonne variant, did actually design a really cool sounding expansion for this called Carcassonne Castle the Falcon, where you have falconing tiles and whatnot. And man, I've always wanted that expansion so much. Rio Grande ultimately decided, this is never gonna get published. And so, Reiner Knizia put all the art and everything that was done for it online. You can download it all right now and make your own versions of it. And I've seen some people have done it and they look so gorgeous. I want that so bad, but I do not have the skills necessary to make my own special Carcassonne the Castle, the Falcon. If anybody's watching this and knows somebody who knows, please give me in touch. I would love to actually play. But even without that core game, it would almost be crazy. I can't imagine this list not having it on here. I mean, this is what introduced us to tile laying games, and we still absolutely adore Carcassonne the Castle. Now, moving on to number 9. Akrotiri, which is a very cool, clever game. The tiles you're laying in this game represent the Grecian Isles of the Aegean Sea, and and players are actually building to a common area, and it's getting bigger and more complex. And basically, as you're building this, you're creating a maze for yourself in what is otherwise a pick up and deliver game. This actually made my top 10 pick up and deliver games as well. But even though it has a strong element of pick up and deliver, I still think of this first and foremost as a tile laying game because most of the decision making it centers around where am I going to place these tiles to actually hit the goals I'm trying to go for, because every player has a collection of secret map cards where they're actually trying to lay tile such that you create certain features in this shared map so that you know where you can go to build temples and whatnot. It's so clever. I've done a run through. Actually, have I done a run through for every single game I'm talking about today has a run through for me. So any of these you can go find out more. But man, this is a really phenomenal game. I've talked about a lot. It's actually made a few different of my top 10s. Absolutely love Akrotiri. Then, oops, sorry about that. Slight glitch on my end, but let's continue moving on to number 8. Citrus from Jeffrey Allers. This is a beautiful tile laying game. It's actually really interesting. It's physically beautiful too. Although when you first start playing the game, the board is really kind of dry and brown and barren because the game is waiting to explode in a riot of color as you plant all these citrus trees all over the board, and or fruiting trees, and the thing just comes alive right in front of you, and it just has such a lovely table presence. But what's really, really interesting from a gameplay perspective is the kind of ebb and flow in this game, because you spend an equal on your turn. You either place tiles or you harvest those tiles, which means that much like Carcassonne, as you're putting tiles out, you're claiming them with your little workers, and you only have a certain number of them, and you'll get to a point where, okay, I just don't have any more of my little guys, so I have to start claiming them. But when it gets to that moment, having to claim them, you might not be ready to claim them. They might not be done with their job, but you have to claim somebody because you just can't move forward without actually having guys to place. Also, the game pushes you to go as long as possible without claiming, because the more people you have on the board when you claim, the more money you can make, so you can buy more tiles, so you can keep doing the tiling. And while all that's going on, there's this really, really cool kind of area majority dominance thing as your tiles you're laying kind of spread out from the central areas that both players share access to, and you're trying to take over more and more stuff. There's lots of cool special powers. It's just a really clever, solid game. We like it a lot. Number 8, Citrus. Then on to number 7. Walnut Grove. And I apologize for even putting this on the list, because this game is well out of print, and I think it's very, very difficult to find these days, and that's a real shame, because I suspect there's a lot of people out here who would really, really love to get a shot at this game, which is, for all intents and purposes, Little House on the Prairie, the board game. And a big, big part of this game is the tile laying as you're building up your farmlands, focusing on different colored tiles and mixing and matching to be able to harvest the resources you need to run a successful Little House on the Prairie. Now, and this might be one of those games where I kind of hemmed and hawed about putting it on the list, because the other half of this game, Citrus has another half of the game. Actually, for most of these tile laying games, almost all of them, there's two halves of these games. There's the how do I get my tiles, and then there's the what do I do with my tiles. And they all have that. This game, though, the how do I get my tiles is a little bit more intricate than the other games, and it almost becomes a whole side game where you spend a good deal of every turn or every round in town, kind of working around town as this sort of time track thing, collecting resources and converting resources to other resources and doing a bunch of other stuff. But still, in spite of all that, the core tile laying in this game is where the rubber hits the road. And if you can build a really good farm, and it's really interesting too, this game is pretty fast and loose with the rules for tiling. You don't have to, unlike the rules that Carcassonne has set out, you don't have to be really careful about mixing and matching and making sure everything lines up perfectly. You get bonuses for doing it, but you have a lot of flexibility and freedom. It's just an incredibly evocative, tight, and tense game, because when every winter comes around, you got to feed your people. I mean, there's a lot of pressure you're under, but it's an absolutely lovely game and a great tile laying game. That was number 10987, Walnut Grove. Now, on to number 6. This is the newest game on the list. Just came out earlier this year. Quadropolis. An awesome, clever puzzle of a tile laying game. And now this one, once again, has its two halves. The how do I get my tiles, and then how do I place my tiles. But unlike all the other ones, this game, those two halves are so intertwined, because you basically, I think what they're called, architect pieces that have numbers like 1 through 4 on them, and you deploy these architects to grab tiles that you want to lay into and build up your little quadropolis. But the architect you deploy to be able to grab tiles also defines where you can place tiles in your own city. So every time you're making a decision to grab a particular tile, you're limiting yourself into where you can actually put that tile. And of course, like any good tile laying game, where you put these tiles so they can interact well with their neighbors and create combo chains and strings like that is where it's all at. This is it's a beautiful game. It is the most gorgeous looking game of all the ones I'm talking about today. The pieces are absolutely stellar. It's an incredibly fast, fun game. It has a lighter gateway version and a slightly heavier kind of gateway plus version of gameplay. We absolutely adore it. Quadropolis. And then moving on to 9876, number 5. This is another one where I thought, well, should I put this on? It's really kind of completely inconsistent. It's more different than any other thing out here. But no, at the end of the day, I couldn't deny the fact. This is a tile layer. Galaxy Trucker. It's just that we're laying those tiles super fast. And again, this kind of hit my, my main metric of whether it should make on the list. Is it mostly about the tiles? And yeah, this totally is. The tiles you're laying in this game are to build your own space truck, to be able to haul goods from one side of the galaxy to another. And all the different tiles you get have different effects, and the way you place them on the grid to actually basically kind of create the layout of your ship determines what your ship is good at, what its strengths and weaknesses are. And then there's like a whole second half of the game where after you've built your ship, you actually send it out into the galaxy. And, while that does take a big part of the game and it feels like, wow, the game's almost more about the journey than the actual building, that's not really the case, because the other half of the game where you actually drive this truck from one side to the other, you make a few simple decisions, but really that's just a long, extended scoring session. You build your ship as best you can, and the interesting thing I haven't mentioned, and for those who don't know, you do it in real time. Unlike all these other games that are slow, sedate, very thoughtful, and cerebral affairs where you're working out the logistics of trying to build the best puzzle, in this game you are under incredible time pressure to grab tiles as fast as possible and build them without messing up, because there's a lot. Probably another thing, this game probably has more specific persnickety little rules about how these tiles have to get laid down, and that's kind of the pressure of it. You have to work within those constraints in real time under incredible pressure. And then once you're done and you've built your ship, for better or worse, it's going to go out and hit the space trucking lanes, and you just better hope it doesn't get blown up by asteroids or space pirates or any number of other things. And like I said, that second half of the game, it's really just a very interactive scoring sequence where you find out, well, just how well did it do. But the actual building, I mean, it requires a lot of imagination, a lot of clever problem solving, all the good stuff that makes a tile laying game compulsive, but it forces you to do it in real time, and it's just a blast. It's also hilarious. The rules booklet is, like most of a lot of Chevadal's games, is just a blast to read. It's fun and entertaining, and the game just makes you laugh from start to, as long as you have a good attitude. Some people I know can be a little sour about this game because they do their best to build, and then they just sit back and watch for 15 minutes as their ship systematically gets absolutely destroyed, and they might find that it might crush their morale, but really you just have to go in knowing that knowing the type of stuff that's going to hit you. Although actually, to be fair, that's an interesting thing. During the real-time portion of this, you can take time out of actually trying to find the right tiles and build to actually take a sneak peek and see what disasters are going to be awaiting your ship. And if you do that, you can be building your ship with those future obstacles in mind. But the more time you take to do that, the more time you take away from actually building your truck. It's such a clever game. So much fun tile laying. Galaxy Trucker. Now, moving on to number 4, Subdivision from Bezier Games, which this is actually sort of a sequel or kind of like a satellite product. It's basically related to another great tile laying game, which, spoiler alert, is yet to come. It's just a question of how high does this game's big brother show up. But Subdivision, even though it lives under the shadow of Suburbia, is a wonderful game in and of itself. And probably more than any other one I've talked about, the puzzle of actually, I talked a bit about how Quadropolis, the mechanism you use to choose what tile you're going to take and build into your city, which is to lay your tile, limits you. This game limits you in where you can actually place your tiles based on a die roll. So you roll the dice, and everybody has to deal with the same thing. Everybody rolls a 6, and okay, well, I can build in one of the spaces that's a 6. And what do I have? What am I going to build? And it's so incredibly simple on the surface, but the decisions you make are so deep because you have to do a lot of risk mitigation. You have to think about, right, well, if I make this choice based on the choices I have this particular round, how is that going to allow me to continue to build in a nice organic way? How is that going to allow me to achieve particular goals for the types of building I'm trying to build? Plus, not for nothing, this game comes with a ton of variants built in. Lots of extra rules. It's a very evergreen game too. You can keep playing it and find new ways to play every time you sit down. But Jen and I, we absolutely adore my number 4. Number 4. So obviously we love it. Subdivision. Now, moving on to number 3. This is a game that might be on a lot of people's mind recently because it just won the Kennerspiel, which is the most prestigious award in designer hobbyist board gaming in the world. It won the Kennerspiel for 2015, beating out Pandemic Legacy, if you can believe that, which is my favorite game of all time. But unfortunately, I'm happy to say I had the foresight to realize this was a phenomenal game. I think it was my number 4 of the year, maybe my number 3. It's a really, really awesome game. What is it? Isle of Skye. Now, this is another one of those games where the other half of the game, the mechanisms devoted to collecting your tiles, almost intrudes enough that I almost thought about leaving this off because I wonder, well, is it really at its heart a tile layer, or is this game more about the other half, which is a system where each round every player gets 3 tiles and they have to set prices for those tiles and actually eliminate one of the tiles that they've collected, and then everybody else around the table gets first dibs on buying those tiles. So you have to be incredibly smart about setting the right price, because if nobody buys it, then you got to pay that money. But if somebody buys it, they pay you for that tile. There's lots of other games like this. This whole I set the prices and you buy, and it works so well here. It's just absolutely phenomenal, and it works really well as a 2-player game too. And like I said, I mean, there's so much of your time and attention and focus is on that half of the game. I was thinking, well, should I put this with other tiling games? Is it a true tile layer? And you know what? Yeah, it is, because you spend just as much time once you actually get those tiles, and some people bought a tile you bought some tiles that they were maybe going to have. You've still got another half of the game, and you have to spend just as much time trying to build, because there's so much push your luck. I mean, these tiles interact with each other in really important ways. I mean, there's like, depending on which tiles you get, you might suddenly find yourself playing a set collection game, and there's also a brilliant scoring system where over the course of the game, every time you play, different objectives are set for all the players to score points. And the thing is, at various points in the game, you repeatedly hit those scoring goals. It's a really clever system. I haven't seen anything quite like it, and it's what probably more than anything else gives this game legs, because every time you play, you're going to get a different combination of tasks you have to achieve, and then on top of that, you're going to get a different combination of tiles that are available to you to achieve them. But the tiling element is strong in this as you try to best build your own little Scottish fiefdom on the Isle of Skye by laying tiles, and that's why it's my number 3. Now, moving on to number 2, and in all honesty, if you had asked me what is my number 1 tiling game of all time before I actually sat down and figured it out, this list, I would have said what I'm about to tell you is my number 2. I would have said it was my number 1, but Glen More is my number 2. And in all honesty, this game is so almost picture perfect in every way. I actually think probably I should rate it my number 1. And I'll be honest, the reason I don't is because I have a German version of it and not an English version. Supposedly this is actually going to be getting a reprint sometime in the next year or 2. Hopefully at that point it'll be released in English. And my only hang-up, the fact that I have to play with actually German cheat sheets or English cheat sheets to deal with all the German that's on the tiles, it's probably going to put it in my number 1 slot. But for now, it's my number 2, and it's a brilliant. The tile laying in this, I would say, is the most intricate and logistically satisfying, because every time you put a tile down, as you collect more and more tiles over the course of the game, you place them down. Every time you put one down, you activate not only that tile, but the adjacent tiles as well. And that creates a constantly evolving puzzle. As you put a tile down early, leaving a space so that later on you'll be able to get another tile to put in, so that you can create like combo chains out of, okay, if I put this here, it'll activate itself and this one, and then both of these things will feed into this other one. If you create the perfect jigsaw puzzle of tiles, you can do amazing things in this game. It's so clever and smart, absolutely brilliant. But you guessed it, folks, it didn't quite beat my number 1, Suburbia. Signed there by the designer, Ted Alspach himself. Still my number 1. This is a city building game, much like Quadropolis, a modern city building game. And like Glen More, this one, it's probably its central key thing that makes it interesting is a lot of the tiles you build, when you place them in your city, they combo with other tiles. And what's more interesting, what is very, very cool about this, which Glen More doesn't have, is it's just as likely that a tile I put down into my city can be impacted by the other tiles I've placed around it, or the tiles you put in your city, because we're all building suburbs of one big central city. So, I might actually build a slaughterhouse that will bring down the residential value of my place. But that'll be great because you've built a lot of restaurants. And because you or the other opponents have a lot of restaurants, this becomes more useful for me to build this particular tile. And that interaction between players, each player is building their own little suburb, but they're connected through these combo chains again. Glenmore has these wonderful combo chains, but it's all just self-contained. In fact, almost all of these things I've talked about you're building your own little space. It's self-contained. Suburbia, what really makes it brilliant is, no. As much as I'm paying attention to my own, I'm paying attention to yours too, because what you've built affects what I do, and the same vice versa. And that's what, for now anyway, keeps it in the #1 spot. And that's it, folks. My top 10 favorite tile layers. Every one of these games is absolutely excellent. Phenomenal experience, great examples of the form, and just a blast to play. And that's it, folks. Thanks for watching. Questions, comments, concerns, always please let me know. Otherwise, hope you have a very, very nice day. Talk to you later. So long. Bye-bye.